Imagine being face to face with the most dangerous man on the planet, a man whose fists moved faster than the human eye could track, and having the nerve to try to kick him. That's exactly what a teenage Sammo Hung did. When I tried to kick him, Sammo recalled years later, I just put my foot halfway up, and he hit me in the face. 8 seconds. It was over. 8 seconds. That's all it took for Bruce Lee to remind the world's greatest martial arts comedian that there was exactly one man in a league of his own. And yet, despite that humbling moment, Sammo Hung would go on to become one of the most important figures in Bruce Lee's orbit, a sparring partner, a student of the same world, and ultimately, the keeper of some of the most intimate stories ever told about the little dragon. For decades, Sammo said almost nothing. He let the film speak. He let the legend grow. But now, at 72 years old, one of Hong Kong cinema's most beloved icons has finally decided to open up. And what he reveals paints a picture of Bruce Lee that no documentary, no biopic, and no Hollywood retelling has ever fully captured. This is the story of two martial arts giants, the world that shaped them both, and the truth that Sammo Hung kept to himself for over 50 years. Section 1. The Making of Sammo Hung. To understand why Sammo's words about Bruce Lee carry such weight, you first have to understand who Sammo Hung actually is, because outside of Asia, the full scope of his genius is still underappreciated. Born on January 7, 1952 in Hong Kong, Sammo Hung Cambo came into the world already surrounded by film. His father, Chin Chingon, was an actor from Shanghai. His mother worked as a wardrobe artist on film sets. With both parents consumed by the demands of the industry, young Sammo was raised primarily by his grandparents, and not just any grandparents. His grandmother, Chin Tang, had appeared in over 80 films. His grandfather, Hung Chung-ho, had been a director working between 1937 and 1950. Cinema wasn't just a career in this family. It was the air they breathed. By the age of 9, Sammo's destiny was essentially sealed when he enrolled at the China Drama Academy, one of Hong Kong's most prestigious and notoriously brutal Peking opera schools. Under the iron fist of Master Yu Jim Yuen, Sammo trained 7 days a week in martial arts, acrobatics, singing, and acting. The training was grueling beyond description. Students were beaten if they made mistakes. They slept in crowded dormitories. They performed through injuries that would have hospitalized most adults. But something extraordinary was happening inside those walls. Sammo wasn't just being trained, he was being forged. He became the eldest and most senior member of a group that Master Yu designated the Seven Little Fortunes, a performance troupe that would go on to reshape Hong Kong's cinema entirely. Among his brothers in that group was a scrawny, scrappy kid who went by the training name Yuen Lo, a boy the world would later come to know as Jackie Chan. Sammo, using the Academy's custom of adopting the master's surname, went by Yuen Lung during this period. But even then, everyone around him knew he was different. Bigger than the others, yes, but also more creative, more technically sharp, and possessed of a timing that couldn't be taught. His first screen appearance came in 1961's Education of Love, and by 1962, he was already sharing the screen with Jackie Chan in Big and Little Wong Tin Bar. At just 14, he began working at Shaw Brothers Studio as an assistant to action director Han Ing-chi, most notably on Come Drink With Me in 1966, a film considered one of the founding texts of Hong Kong martial arts cinema. But everything changed in 1973. That was the year a young Sammo Hung appeared in Enter the Dragon as a sparring partner, specifically the sparring partner of Bruce Lee himself. It was the beginning of a relationship that Sammo has guarded closely ever since. Section 2. Meeting the Dragon. The set of Enter the Dragon was unlike anything Hong Kong cinema had produced before. This was the first ever Hong Kong-American co-production, backed by Warner Brothers, directed by Robert Klaus, and built entirely around the singular phenomenon that was Bruce Lee. By 1973, Bruce wasn't just a martial artist or an actor. He was a philosophy in motion. He had already redefined what a human body could do on film. He had created Jeet Kune Do, his own martial arts system, from scratch, blending Wing Chun, boxing, fencing, and pure intuition into something no school had ever taught. He was 32 years old at the absolute peak of his physical and creative powers, and Enter the Dragon was supposed to introduce him to every corner of the world simultaneously. And it was into this world that a 21-year-old Sammo Hung walked, ready to throw a kick. What happened next is one of the most telling stories in the history of martial arts cinema. The opening sequence of Enter the Dragon required a sparring partner who was genuinely skilled, someone who could hold their own well enough to make Bruce Lee look appropriately challenged before Lee inevitably dominated the exchange. Sammo, already known in Hong Kong circles as one of the most capable fighters of his generation, was the natural choice. But the moment Sammo attempted to test him, a single kick, half committed, half exploratory, Bruce exploded. Not with rage, with speed. Pure, incomprehensible speed. A strike to the face that lasted 8 seconds from initiation to completion. Not because Lee was toying with him, but because that was simply how fast he moved. Sammo's recollection of that moment is telling not just for what it says about Bruce Lee's ability, but for what it says about Sammo's honesty. Here is a man who spent his career choreographing some of the most sophisticated fight sequences in cinema history, who trained with the greatest martial artists of his generation, who carried an entire genre on his shoulders for decades, and when asked about Bruce Lee, his answer is simple and direct: there was no one like him. Section 3. Who Bruce Lee really was. Bruce Lee was born Lee Junfan on November 27, 1940 in San Francisco, California, specifically during the Hour of the Dragon, a detail his family would later point to as an omen. His father, Lee Hoi Chen, was a celebrated Cantonese opera singer. His mother, Grace Ho, was of Eurasian descent, giving Bruce a mixed heritage that would shape and complicate his identity throughout his life. The family returned to Hong Kong shortly after his birth, and Bruce grew up in a world steeped in performance. By 3 months old, he had already appeared on film, used as a stand-in for an American baby in Golden Gate Girl, 1941. Between 1946 and 1958, he appeared in roughly 20 films, including his first leading role alongside his father in The Kid in 1950. But beneath the screen credits, Bruce's childhood was turbulent. His mixed background made him a target. He was teased for his appearance, marginalized for his heritage, and ultimately driven towards street gangs as a means of self-defense. By his teenage years, he was fighting regularly, not on film, but on rooftops and alleyways, and his parents were being called to police stations to answer for the consequences. The turning point came at 13, when Bruce began training under the legendary Ip Man in Wing Chun Kung Fu. The style suited him perfectly. Close-range combat, devastating strikes, and a philosophical discipline that matched his restless mind. Under Ip Man's guidance, Bruce developed not just fighting skills, but framework for how he understood himself and his place in the world. But even within Ip Man's school, Bruce faced rejection. His Eurasian heritage led some senior students to refuse to train with him, forcing him to seek private lessons. Rather than break him, this discrimination sharpened his resolve. It pushed him to look beyond the boundaries of any single system and ask what fighting could become if you stripped away tradition and kept only what worked. The answer to that question would eventually become Jeet Kune Do. But before he could articulate it, his parents made a decision that would change everything. In April 1959, following a serious rooftop altercation that resulted in police involvement, Bruce's parents sent him to America. The message was simple: sink or swim. Section 4. The philosophy behind the fists. Bruce Lee arrived in San Francisco and eventually made his way to Seattle, Washington, where he finished high school and enrolled at the University of Washington to study philosophy. The choice of major was not accidental. Bruce had always been as interested in the why of martial arts as the how. He wanted to understand the mind behind the movement. He began teaching Wing Chun informally out of his home, and by 1964 had opened his first official school, the Junfan Kung Fu Institute in Seattle. But his approach was already diverging from tradition. Where traditional schools emphasized forms, rituals, and adherence to style, Bruce emphasized practicality. He told his students, use what works. Discard what doesn't. Never let any system own you. It was this philosophy that led directly to his first major controversy. When he began teaching non-Chinese students, the traditional martial arts community pushed back hard. A formal challenge was issued by Wong Jack Man, a direct student of Ip Man, intended to settle the question of whether Bruce had the right to teach outside traditional boundaries. The fight lasted somewhere between 3 minutes and 25 depending on who you believe, but on one point everyone agreed: Bruce won. The experience only accelerated his evolution. By the time he was demonstrating his 1-inch punch and 2-finger push-ups at the 1964 Long Beach International Karate Championships, captivating a crowd that had never seen anything like it, Bruce Lee was already operating in a category that didn't have a name yet. He called it Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. Not a style, not a system, a philosophy, an approach to combat so fluid, so adaptable, and so ruthlessly practical that it ultimately could not be contained within a school. When Bruce closed his Chinatown Kung Fu School in early 1970, he did so not because of his film career, as many assumed, but specifically to protect Jeet Kune Do from becoming institutionalized. He understood that the moment you formalize something, you begin to kill it. This is what Sammo Hung recognized in those 8 seconds. This is what no sparring session, no film, and no demonstration could fully convey to an audience watching from the outside. Bruce Lee was not performing a style. He was expressing a living, evolving idea. Sammo Hung's encounter with Bruce Lee was brief in terms of screen time, but enormous in its influence. After Enter the Dragon, Sammo's career exploded. His directorial debut came in 1977 with Iron-Fisted Monk, and throughout the late 1970s and 1980s, he became the defining creative force in Hong Kong action cinema, starring in, directing, and choreographing films like Encounters of the Spooky Kind, 1980, The Prodigal Son, 1981, and The Magnificent Butcher, 1979. Together with Jackie Chan and Yuan Biao, his brothers from the China Drama Academy, Sammo created a trilogy of films, including Project A, 1983, and Wheels on Meals, 1984, that represented the apex of physical cinema. No wires, no CGI, just 3 men who'd spent their entire childhoods training their bodies to do impossible things, doing them on camera. Sammo's particular genius was the integration of comedy with combat. Where Bruce Lee's films were defined by intensity and philosophy, Sammo understood that laughter and pain could coexist, that a man could be genuinely funny and genuinely dangerous in the same moment. It was a tonal breakthrough that would define Hong Kong cinema for an entire generation. But Sammo has always been clear about the hierarchy. When people ask who was the greatest, there's no hesitation. Bruce Lee was operating on a different plane. Not just physically, though the 8-second story makes that abundantly clear, but philosophically and cinematically. Bruce understood something about how the camera could capture human emotion that no one before or since has fully replicated. Bruce Lee died on July 20, 1973, just months after wrapping Enter the Dragon and just weeks before the film's release. He was 32 years old. The official cause was cerebral edema, likely triggered by an allergic reaction to a prescription painkiller he had taken for a headache. He never got to see the global impact of Enter the Dragon. He never got to see himself become a legend. Sammo did. Section 6. What Sammo carries with him. For 50 years, Sammo Hung has carried the memory of Bruce Lee not as a burden, but as a standard. Every fight sequence he has ever choreographed, every film he has ever directed, every young stuntman he has ever trained has been influenced, whether consciously or not, by what he witnessed in those 8 seconds on the set of Enter the Dragon. When Sammo returned to prominence as the action choreographer on Ip Man 2008, and its sequels, a new generation discovered what the old guard already knew. His mastery had never diminished. When he stepped back behind the director's chair for The Bodyguard in 2016, nearly 20 years after his last directorial effort, he proved that his creative vision remained as sharp as ever. He has trained hundreds of actors and stunt people. He has won a Lifetime Achievement Award at the New York Asian Film Festival. He has survived heart surgery, financial collapse, the decline and resurgence of the genre he helped build, and the complex private life that comes with being both a celebrity and a human being. But when people ask about Bruce Lee, all of that falls away. There is no posturing, no attempt to position himself as an equal. Just a direct, honest account of a moment that lasted 8 seconds and changed how Sammo Hung understood what a human being was capable of. I tried to kick him, he says. He hit me in the face. And then a pause that carries 50 years of respect. 8 seconds. Outro. Bruce Lee left the world a philosophy disguised as a fighting style. Sammo Hung took that world and kept it alive, kept it evolving, kept it honest, for the decades after Lee was gone. 2 men from the same world, shaped by the same tradition, reaching the same conclusion through entirely different paths, that the art is alive only as long as the artist refuses to let it become a museum piece. At 72, Sammo Hung has finally broken his silence. And the story he tells is not one of rivalry or nostalgia. It is one of recognition, the recognition of a man who understood, in 8 seconds flat, that he was standing in the presence of something unrepeatable. If you found this story as extraordinary as we did, leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the relationship between these 2 legends. And if you want to go deeper into the golden age of Hong Kong martial arts cinema, our next video is waiting for you.